In terms of the approaches to display, there's also a vast array of approaches. You know, everything from something that's quite abstract and pared back with very minimal information to those that are really very much about educating and informing, perhaps teaching the public about a particular technique, a particular period, through to more personal reflections on fashion. There have been a number of exhibitions, for instance, that focus on the wardrobes of key individuals who have, for any number of reasons, chosen to invest in their own personal fashion collections. And flowing on from that, you also have a range of events, things like fashion festivals, which we have now within Australia as a venue not only for showing designers' work on the catwalk from current collections, but again, another type of forum for actually allowing the public to engage with fashion and think about fashion. And from a curator's perspective, in some respects, the display or the putting together of an exhibition of fashion is in principle no different to any other type of exhibition. You have to begin by thinking about what it is that you want to communicate through the exhibition, selecting works, deciding on how to display them and what information you put out in the exhibition. But on the other hand, there are some things that are very specific and I guess sort of add a level of complexity to the display of fashion and textiles. And one of those is the fact that people often really want to see things in the round, so always trying to think very in great depth about how you display things, sometimes using mirrors to be able to show fronts and backs of garments, or in the case of this exhibition here where you can actually walk around plinths and see fronts and backs as well. But there's also the whole story in terms of mannequins and the physical display of garments. And I guess it's quite telling in a way that there's been such a long history of fashion exhibitions that along with that history there's been changing fashions in how the works are displayed. Certainly in the early days it was quite typical that there'd be a very realistic approach to displaying fashion. And when I say realistic, I mean having mannequins with wigs and sometimes makeup and full accessories to really try and replicate the look of the time. And then there was a move away from that to a much more abstract, if you like, sort of pared back way of displaying things, sometimes not even on mannequins, sometimes simply suspended in space or on hangers. And each of them has their place, obviously. But in terms of one of the main points I wanted to talk about today and think about and perhaps get your responses as well at the end, it's to actually think about what it is about exhibitions like these and the Stephen Jones exhibition that was on here recently, and in fact the Easton Pearson exhibition that was on before that. What it is about these types of exhibitions that has the capacity to appeal to audiences and to have an impact on the audience. And certainly there's two ways of looking at that. There's from the institution's perspective, what it is about holding an exhibition like this, which is very appealing, and certainly a couple of the important ones are that exhibitions of fashion and textiles tend to be perceived by the public as very accessible, not sort of threatening in some respects the way that certain forms of other visual arts can feel like something that's a bit more rarefied, or something that if you don't have the knowledge you don't feel as comfortable going along to see an exhibition of that type of work. But with fashion garments, they're familiar on some level or another, and that allows people to feel very at ease and to feel that they have the right to have an opinion and to feel a connection with the garments on display. So certainly exhibitions like this draw a broad audience, and sometimes from a gallery and museum perspective they're really important because they draw in an audience which perhaps might not ordinarily even come to a gallery or museum. But then in terms of the public perspective, obviously there's a number of things. Certainly fashion or access to images of fashion, whether it's in video form, on the internet or in magazines and books, are around us all the time. So what is it about seeing things up close that makes a difference? And I think it is that, in the same way that it can be with paintings and other forms of art too, there is something that you can only really get by standing directly in front of something and being able to study it and truly see it by looking at the stitching, by looking at the texture, by marvelling at how something was even constructed or what exactly the technique that's used is. And there's something, I think, of the wonder that fashion can convey that is really critical to its appeal. Certainly, one of its other appeals is from the point of view of inspiration and certainly aspiration, both general public designers. Lots of people have spoken about being inspired by what they've seen, both in terms of their own practice, perhaps, if they're a designer, or just even thinking differently about their own wardrobes at home or the wardrobes of their mother or grandmother, and feeling that connection, whether it's through nostalgia or whether it's through kind of piquing a desire, if you like, to make more of how we dress and how we express ourselves through clothing.